They called him a builder of empires, but his enemies called him a demon. And when the torches flared, the truth was revealed. A prisoner forced to watch as his wife was exposed, pushed to crawl in the dirt. The Khan raised his cup, milk, spilling white across the ground. He smiled, calm, almost fatherly, as generals looked away. "Fear," he whispered, "is the only mercy. If you had been there, would you laugh with the guards or pray his eyes would not find you? History calls him a builder of empires. His enemies called him a demon. Tonight, you'll see why." The torches rose high, their smoke curling into the black steppe sky. The drums pounded slow, a heavy sound echoing across the steppe. Like a second heartbeat, none could escape. A heartbeat for the gathering. Prisoners were dragged into the circle, their clothes torn, their backs raw from the whip. The Khan sat above them, cloak heavy, silver cup in hand. He drank milk slow, his beard wet with white. "Fear cuts deeper than mercy," he said, his voice low, calm, almost gentle. "I give them fear, and so I give them life." The generals shifted. None dared reply. A prisoner was forced to his knees. His wife was dragged beside him. Her humiliation was personal, meant to break one man before them all. Her hair tangled, her eyes hollow. The guards exposed her to the waist, pushed her forward, forced her to dance before the circle. Not joy, only a satisfaction as cruel as iron. "You see," he whispered, "if he survives, he will never rise against us. My cruelty spares him a greater death." The drums grew louder. The woman stumbled, a heavy sound echoing across the steppe, like a second heartbeat none could escape. This shame was public, burned into the memory of every soldier watching, shivering in the firelight. The guards shoved her again, making the circle laugh. But the generals did not laugh. Their faces were stone. Mercy flickers like fire. But fear lingers, long after the flames die. If your blood were offered, would you scream or stay silent? If you had stood there, what would you have done? A hush clung to the air, thick as frost, praying the Khan's eyes would not find you. The prisoner lunged, desperate, toward his wife. The guards brought him low, his body hit the dirt. Yet now, the eyes of the generals lingered not on her, but on him, the ruler who had lost their respect. His mouth full of blood. The Khan raised his cup. "Drink!" he ordered the generals. "Drink to fear! Drink to obedience!" They obeyed, hands shaking. Milk spilled again. No longer pure, now a stain that could not be washed away across their fingers. The Khan leaned back, satisfied, his smile calm, almost fatherly, to him. This was not cruelty. It was order. It was mercy twisted into steel. The drums slowed. The torches hissed. The woman's sobs filled the silence. Their smoke choked the air, stinging eyes, burning throats. Yet now, the eyes of the generals lingered not on her, but on him, the ruler who had lost their respect. The Khan's cup gleamed in the firelight, his voice soft, final. Tonight, they learned to live. The sun was high, white, and merciless. Dust rose from the camp as soldiers moved like ants, tending horses, sharpening blades, in the center square. The Khan had ordered a platform built, rough wood, stained dark, around it. His generals gathered, eyes narrowed against the glare. The prisoners were dragged out. Women, men, exposed to rags, their faces burned under the sun. The ruler stepped onto the platform. His cloak caught the wind, his shadow long, his voice rang sharp. Night hides weakness, but day burns it away. Today, they will learn shame. He motioned. Guards forced a woman to her knees before the generals. Dust clung to her skin, sweat ran down her back. Yet now, the eyes of the generals lingered not on her, but on him, the ruler who had lost their respect. The Khan crouched beside her, whispering loud enough for all to hear. "You kneel as if to a god. Do you see me? I am no god. I am greater. For gods wait for prayers. I take." He tore the cloth from her shoulders. Gasps rose. The sun blazed hotter, making her humiliation complete. The generals shifted uneasily, the brightness offering no shadows to hide in. If your blood were offered, would you scream or stay silent? If you had stood there, what would you have done? Would you shut your eyes against the glare or watch, knowing turning away brands you weak? The Khan rose, spreading his arms. "Look at her. Look at what surrender makes of the proud. This is mercy. To live without honor is mercy." He forced the woman to crawl the length of the platform. Dust caked her hands, her knees bled on splinters. Yet now, the eyes of the generals lingered not on her, but on him, the ruler who had lost their respect. When she reached the edge, the Khan clapped once. Enough. She lives. Because shame is heavier than death. The crowd of soldiers roared approval, but the generals stayed silent. The woman collapsed in the dirt. Yet now, the eyes of the generals lingered not on her, but on him, the ruler who had lost their respect. Her sobs drowned by the cheer. The Khan turned, smiling thinly. "Write this into your hearts. My mercy shines brighter than the sun, and it burns." The platform stood empty, but the air still carried the weight of dust. Sweat, a hush, clung to the air, thick as frost. The war tent was heavy with smoke. Maps lay stretched across the table, pinned with daggers. "This village has sent word of surrender," the Khan said. "They offer tribute. They beg for mercy." The generals nodded. An easy path. The Khan's eyes narrowed. He lifted his cup. Bending is not enough. They must break. He set the cup down. Milk dripping across the map. His finger pressed into the stone marking the village. "Burn it!" A murmur rose. Batu's voice was low but steady. "Father, they have yielded. Their obedience feeds us better than ash." Even in silence, Batu's gaze weighed heavier than a sword. He was not absent, he was waiting. The tent froze. The Khan stepped close to his son, his breath thick with milk. "You question me?" Batu did not move. "I speak truth." Even in silence, Batu's gaze weighed heavier than a sword. He was not absent, he was waiting. "If you had been in that tent, if you had stood there, what would you have done? Would you stand with Batu or keep your eyes down, praying not to be seen?" It was not joy. It was the calm of cruelty. Hours later, the horizon glowed. Flames tore through roofs. Villagers cried out. A woman cried out as her house collapsed. She tore free. Yet, now, the eyes of the generals lingered not on her, but on him, the ruler who had lost their respect, trying to run. The Khan flicked his hand. An arrow struck her back. She fell, flames behind her. He looked back once, only to laugh. Even surrender is no shield. Fear is the only coin they will spend forever. The generals forced themselves to cheer. Batu stayed silent. His eyes burned brighter than the fire behind them. Around them, soldiers shifted uneasily, glancing at each other, too afraid even to breathe. The ruler chose ruin, and with it, he chose the seed of his own end. The hall glowed with torchlight. The Khan sat at the head, his eyes scanning the circle of generals. One seat remained empty. He tapped his cup. "Where is he?" No one answered. The Khan's lips curled. Fear teaches presence. Absence is rebellion. Prisoners were dragged in, forced to kneel. The Khan rose. "Tonight, we feast not on food, but on loyalty. Watch." He motioned. Guards exposed a man's tunic, then pulled his wife beside him. Yet now, the eyes of the generals lingered not on her, but on him, the ruler who had lost their respect, bearing her before the fire. The man cried out. The generals lowered their eyes. The Khan's gaze fell back to the empty seat. Where fear fails, example teaches, if one refuses to attend, all must see what awaits him. He nodded. A guard struck the bound man. His wife cried out. Yet now, the eyes of the generals lingered not on her, but on him, the ruler who had lost their respect. Had it been your family, would you endure or break? If your blood were offered, would you scream or stay silent? Would you keep drinking or set down your cup? A hush clung to the air, thick as frost. The cloaked figure spread his arms wide. I am not cruel. I am merciful. I save you from the pain of rebellion. You will thank me. His men bowed. The empty seat remained, glowing like a wound in the circle. No joy, only the sharp edge of cold pride. The steppe stretched wide under a gray sky. Ahead, a line of prisoners stumbled barefoot. The Khan turned in the saddle. Tonight. No feast. Tonight. The hunt. A murmur rippled through the generals. The Khan's smile was calm. Animals grow scarce, but men are plenty. Better sport. He lifted a bow. An arrow tore into a prisoner's back. The others cried out, scattering. Run! The Khan thundered. Run, and prove your worth as prey! The guards cut the chains. The prisoners bolted. The ruler spurred his horse. Chase them! A general hesitated. My Khan... The Khan's eyes turned cold. Will you shame me by refusing, or will you honor me with blood? Had it been your family, would you endure or break? If your blood were offered, would you scream or stay silent? Would you raise your bow or let your horse stand still, knowing either choice brands you forever? One general lifted his bow, hands shaking. He shot. A prisoner toppled. The Khan laughed, clapping his shoulder. Good. You learn. Stillness, pressed down heavier than iron chains, but in their eyes, for the first time, there was not only fear, there was disgust, the hall filled with smoke and whispers. One general was dragged forward, accused of absence, of silence. The ruler's eyes burned. Presence is loyalty, absence is treason. They forced him to his knees, exposed of armor. The soldiers looked on, frozen. He begged. The ruler lifted his cup. Mercy is weakness. Fear teaches faster. The general's cry echoed as he was struck down before all. And every man watching learned that silence was more dangerous than rebellion. The wind howled across the steppe. Snow bit into skin, froze the breath in their lungs. The army marched, each step heavy, each face hollow. Those who stumbled were left in the snow. A soldier fell, hands shaking. The cloaked figure did not slow. Strike him, he ordered. An arrow struck the man's back. Crimson stained the frozen ground. The army moved on. Mercy had no place in winter. Only fear kept them walking, mile after mile, into the endless frost. The wind carried dust across the camp, stinging eyes, drying throats. Even the horses stamped uneasily, as if they too felt the weight of fear. One night, a slave laughed too loudly near the fires. The sound was small, almost nothing, but the cloaked figure heard it. He raised his hand, and the man was dragged into silence. A single laugh erased forever. And the soldiers knew then that even joy was dangerous. A mother once hid her child as the army passed. She pressed him beneath the straw, whispering, "Do not breathe." The child's eyes wide, the mother's heart pounding. Above them, hooves thundered, voices barked. The army did not see, but the mother would remember forever. The empire ruled even her silence. Among the watching eyes was Batu, the grandson. His jaw tightened, though his lips stayed sealed. Even then, he measured the cost of fear. The campaign stalled. Food was scarce because villages had been burned. Men grew restless. Their loyalty, once forged in victory, now soured in hunger. The generals gathered often, their voices low. They did not speak of treason. Not yet. They spoke of supplies, of morale, of the coming winter. But beneath each word, another name was unspoken: Batu. Even in silence, Batu's gaze weighed heavier than a sword. He was not absent. He was waiting. The Khan saw the whispers. He felt the shift. His feasts grew harsher, his demands more absolute. He believed he could crush doubt with more fear. Instead, he only fed it. He called for another ritual, another display of power. But the general's eyes were different now. They were no longer just afraid. They were watching, waiting. The Khan raised his cup. "Drink to my rule!" A hush clung to the air, thick as frost. The hall was silent, thick with smoke. A prisoner was dragged forward, broken, bent. The Khan leaned down. "This is how loyalty is forged." The man raised his head. His eyes burned, and then he laughed, a low, cracked laugh that echoed against the stone. The hall froze. The Khan's smile faltered. The prisoner spat blood. A hush clung to the air, thick as frost, too afraid to speak. Who rules who? The cloaked figure struck the man. Red scattered. Still, the prisoner laughed. "Had it been your family, would you endure or break? If your blood were offered, would you scream or stay silent? Would you cover your ears or listen, knowing that laugh was more dangerous than any sword?" Stillness, pressed down heavier than iron chains. Guards moved, but their hands shook. The prisoner's laughter grew wilder, unstoppable. The general whose cup had fallen before looked up again. His jaw clenched. He did not look away. The Khan's eyes snapped toward him. Will you laugh too?" Stillness, pressed down heavier than iron chains. The prisoner's voice carried one last time. "Your fear is over. They will rise." A hush clung to the air, thick as frost, and in the corners of the hall, the sound of laughter still seemed to echo. The hall flickered with torchlight. The generals sat, cups untouched. The echo of laughter hung in the air. The Khan's eyes scanned the circle. He motioned. A guard ripped open a woman's dress, forcing her to crawl. Her husband groaned. Yet now, the eyes of the generals lingered not on her, but on him, the ruler who had lost their respect. The generals stared into their cups. Only one looked up, the same general from before. His eyes met the Khan's. The hall froze. No joy, only the sharp edge of cold pride. The general's jaw tightened. His hand shook. His cup slipped, clattering against the floor. The cup shattered, milk and iron on the stone, the end of obedience white. The silence weighed like stone on the chest. The ruler rose. "Is this rebellion, or is it fear?" The general bowed low. "Fear, my Khan, always F-E-A-R. The Khan crouched, forced the man's face up. "Good. Let your fear teach the others." He turned to the prisoners. A flick of his hand. Guards struck them down. The hall shook with cries. The Khan spread his arms wide. "This is loyalty born of fear." The generals raised their cups, hands shaking. But the spilled milk on the floor shone pale, white upon stone, white like bone, white like silence itself, a stain no one could erase. The fire burned low, the air thick with smoke. The prisoners slumped in chains, lips split, but their eyes were no longer hollow. They were watching. The Khan slammed his cup down. "Erase them!" The guards moved, but even as sacrifice spilled, the memory of laughter lingered. The cloaked figure stood, his voice roared, "Obey me, fear me, cheer me!" No one cheered, not this time. A hush clung to the air, thick as frost. Then Batu moved, even in silence. Batu's gaze weighed heavier than a sword. He was not absent, he was waiting. He lifted his cup, then let it fall. The crash rang like thunder. Milk and iron clanged on stone. Every head turned. The Khan's face twisted. His son did not bow, did not flinch. A hush clung to the air, thick as frost. His men did not cheer. The guards did not roar. The Khan shouted again. His voice broke. No one obeyed. The circle had snapped, and with the sound of a cup shattering in the dirt, his empire began to break. The night was cold. No drums, no fire, only the wind, a heavy sound echoing across the steppe. Like a second heartbeat, none could escape. The cloaked figure sat alone in his tent. He called for guards. None came. He called for wine. None brought it. Stillness pressed down heavier than iron chains. "Stand!" he roared. "Cheer your Khan!" No one moved. Then Batu stepped forward. His son, his blood, even in silence. Batu's gaze weighed heavier than a sword. He was not absent. He was waiting. Those who sat in silence watched. The Khan stared at him. You defy me?" Batu's voice was calm. "I do not cheer ruin." Even in silence. Batu's gaze weighed heavier than a sword. He was not absent. He was waiting. The words cut sharper than any blade. "Had it been your family, would you endure or break? If your blood were offered, would you scream or stay silent? Would you shout for the Khan or hold your tongue, knowing history was breaking before your eyes?" The ruler's face twisted. He raised his cup. The cup shattered, milk and iron on the stone, the end of obedience. His arm shook. "I am Khan, I am—" The cup slipped. It struck the dirt. Final. No one picked it up. The generals turned their backs. The guards lowered their eyes. The Khan shouted again, his voice thin, scattered in the wind. Batu did not shout back. He only stood silent. Even in silence, Batu's gaze weighed heavier than a sword. He was not absent. He was waiting. One by one, the men walked away, torches snuffed, shadows fading. The Khan remained alone. By dawn, no army remained. A hush clung to the air, thick as frost, and the Khan was nothing but a man undone by his own blood. From that silence, the empire began to rot, what fear had built in blood. Silence now unmade. That night, a ritual was held. Prisoners were bound, laid beneath the torches. The ruler raised his cup, pouring milk upon the ground. Sacrifice feeds the soil, fear feeds the soul. The guards sacrificed before the fire of the bound. Their voices rose with the smoke. The generals bowed, but their eyes stayed dark. For what kind of faith is born from terror? And if you had stood there, would you pray or curse the sky in silence? In the dead of night, soldiers whispered by the fires. One muttered, "He calls it mercy, but I see only ash and hunger." Another spat into the dirt, then looked over his shoulder, afraid. Their voices fell quiet as footsteps approached. Even whispers carried the risk of death. Fear ruled not just the day, but every hour, even in dreams. Batu, his blood, stood with a steady jaw and an untouched cup. If you were in that ring, would you look up or keep your eyes on the dirt and call it loyalty? Morning boiled white across the steppe. A wooden platform rose in the camp square. Ropes hung like mute banners. The Khan climbed the steps. His shadow stretched across boards cut rough. "Death is simple," he told the army. "A blade falls. Fear dies with the corpse, but memory lasts longer than bone. That is why I spare them." Heads were shaved, ash symbols painted across brows. A brand hissed in the brazier. Iron touched skin. The smell lifted, thin and sour. The crowd flinched. The Khan did not. "They walk away alive," he said. "Marked, useful, afraid." He scanned the ranks. "Drink." Cups rose. Batu's cup rose, too dry, at the rim. By dusk, they reached a village that had laid bread and salt on a carpet in the road. Gates open, tools stacked in rows. People knelt in silence, weapons tied with ribbon. The Khan dismounted and walked the line like a judge. He studied faces, not people patterns of fear, pockets of pride, places where defiance hides and waits. "This," he told the generals, "is a victory history forgets, and yet fear must still be fed." He took a torch, held it high. "Mercy is fire." He didn't shout, he only nodded. Flame moved like wind. Thatch whooshed, rafters snapped, smoke rolled low, then rose high. People scattered, then circled back, then dropped to the earth, not knowing where to go. A roof folded in a shower of sparks. The Khan stood with the torch upright like a scepter. "Let every horizon carry this smoke," he said. "Let it go where my riders will go next." Batu pushed his horse through heat. "Father." The word cut the noise. "This is not mercy, it is madness." The Khan set a hand on Batu's shoulder, a quiet weight. "Peace breeds doubt," he said. "Doubt breeds knives, fire breeds memory. One day you will thank me." Batu said nothing. The village answered for him. By nightfall, it was a field of coals. The army rode on through ash. Feast night. Meat turned on spits, milk steamed in bowls. Captives knelt at the rim of light. The generals sat in a circle, faces the color of flame. One seat was empty. The Khan noticed at once. He lifted the untouched cup from the vacant cushion and poured it into the dirt. "Who sits here?" he asked. No one spoke. "Absence," he said softly, "is a decision." He ordered the man's family to the council. No blood, no spectacle, only law. "Present yourself by dawn," the Khan said, "or ride as an exile under open sky." The generals nodded. None met Batu's eyes. If your seat had been the empty one, would you ride back to kneel or ride forward and not look back? No feast the next night. Moon like bone. Step like a sea. Prisoners marched into open ground. Ropes cut. "Run," the Khan said. At first stone, then flight, feet and breath, breath and fear. The Khan spurred forward, hooves thundered, arrows hissed. A man veered toward Batu. Their eyes met, terror and resolve in one heartbeat. Batu hauled his reins hard. Another rider slammed the man down with a shield. Silence rolled back over the plain. The Khan raised his bow. "This is rule," he shouted. "Choose pursue or be pursued." The hunt ended when the moon slid behind cloud. Footprints faded under wind. The Khan drank from the white cup. Batu wiped dust from his arm and stared until the horizon lost its shape. Weeks bled away. Fields were ash, storehouses hollow, streams black at the banks. Hunger stole the army's roar. Pots held thin broth the color of smoke. Men chewed leather to quiet their teeth. Horses became ribs and shadows. The Khan rode through like iron on a rail. "You hunger because the earth is forging you," he said. "Weak men feast, strong men endure. When spring comes, you'll be wolves." Some fists rose, most didn't. In a low tent, a sputtering lantern. A handful of generals spoke where even whispers sounded loud. "Our men can't march on smoke. He burns what we could eat. He calls it mercy," said another. "It's rot." The last thought stayed behind their teeth, but Batu heard it anyway. If you stood under that canvas, would you speak the last thought or keep it like a knife under your tongue? That night, the Khan ate alone by a private fire. The last deer hissed on a spit. The smell walked the camp like a ghost. Men swallowed air, as if it were meat. The Khan carved a slice and held it toward the dark where Batu stood. "The strong always eat," he said. "Remember." Frost stitched the steppe by morning. The generals met openly. No more hiding. "Our men won't last the winter. Every step is over bones. Soon, the bones will be ours." They turned to Batu. "You are his blood," one said. "Does his mercy look like life to you?" His jaw worked. No words came. He left before the silence could settle on him. That evening, the torches flamed again. Another circle, another ritual of authority. Captives led into the ring. The Khan lifted his palm to begin the old speech, and a captive laughed. Low at first, then clear. Not madness, not begging, defiance. The sound walked the ring and stood in front of every man. The Khan's face didn't change. His eyes did. "You laugh at law?" "At fear," the captive said. "At the man who wears it like a crown." A horse stamped. A flame leaned in the wind. The Khan struck once. The captive sagged and laughed again, thin but unbroken. The sound moved like cold water through ranks of hot faces. Men stared at the ground, so no one would read their thoughts. Batu swallowed hard and felt the ring tilt under his boots. For the first time, the Khan's hand shook. The ring felt it. The air felt it. He lifted his blade anyway. Steel flashed. Silence fell like snow. The body was carried away. But the sound stayed. Men heard it when they closed their eyes. They heard it when they tried to sleep. They heard it when the wind moved the tent ropes and made them sing. The next night, the Khan spoke louder, faster, words like stones. "Fear is the chain. Fear is the crown. Without it, you are nothing." He raised the white cup. "Drink to my mercy." Cups rose. Batu's rose too. His fingers loosened. The cup slipped. It struck the dirt with a dull, final sound. Liquid bled into dust. No one moved. The Khan stared at him. "Pick it up." Batu did not bend. Another general lowered his cup. Another let his hand fall. Then another. Rings of obedience cracked outward like ice on a river. The Khan stood. "You dare defy me?" His voice broke on the last word. The wind finished it for him. Batu stepped forward. He did not shout. "Your mercy has burned itself out." The tent listened. So did the army beyond it. That night, the fires burned low. Men packed quietly. Some tied their bedrolls with care. Some lifted saddles without speaking. No one sang. No one told stories. They waited for dawn like men wait for a verdict they already know. If you had been there, would you pack, or would you stand guard and hope the old fear still worked? Morning arrived gray and thin. The Khan woke to a silence that didn't belong to him. He stepped outside and found emptiness. No banners, no horses, no men. Ash where the cooking pits had been, half moons of hoof prints already smudged by wind. "Batu," he called. No answer. "Generals, my wolves!" Only the steppe replied. He walked to the ridge where he had once watched his army flood the earth. The plain was blank. The world had moved away from him in the night. He went back to the tent and sat with the white cup in his hand. He waited for footsteps, for a cough, for a lie. None came. He stood again, walked the camp alone, past the place where the platform had stood, past the brazier where the brand had hissed, past the pole where the empty seat had faced the fire. Everything that had been law was only wood and rope now. The rope hung quiet. The wood looked small. He returned to the ridge. Frost crackled under his boots. He tried a prayer, though he had never believed in any god but fear. "I gave you order," he told the sky. "I gave you life." The wind lifted the words and set them down behind him like broken twigs. He thought of the village that had placed bread and salt in the road. He thought of the torch, of Batu's hand not shaking when the CUP fell, of a man who laughed and made a king look small. He tightened his cloak and looked for smoke on the horizon. None. Only light. Only distance. By noon, he understood. The empire had not been horses, nor tents, nor blades. It had been the space inside other men's chests where fear lived. That space was empty now. The men had taken it with them. He walked the camp one last time, as if inventorying a life. A torn strap, a cracked bowl, a feather caught in a guy line. Nothing that could be commanded, nothing that could be kept. He sat with the white cup and tried to drink. His hand refused. He set the cup down in the frost and watched the breath of the earth curl above it. Minutes passed, then hours. The light changed. The world did not. He remembered what he used to tell them. Silence is obedience. Now it was not. He stood until his knees shook and the horizon blurred. He waited for hoofs he could not hear. He waited for men who would not return. The steppe answered with wind. The wind said nothing. It did not need to. That was the end of the law he had written. Not with a charge, not with a blade, with men who finally chose to say nothing at all. You are still here. So ask yourself, if fear were a cup, who has been holding it him? Or the men who kept refilling it? If you had stood in that ring, would you have laughed? Would you have dropped your cup? Or would you have kept your eyes on the dirt and called it loyalty? The story did not end at the ridge. It traveled with the men who left. They rode in silence, not together, not yet, but away from the center. Snow came early. Tracks vanished behind them. Hunger stalked the column lines like a wolf. They shared dried roots in small circles and did not speak the Khan's name. They called the winter the long breath, because every breath felt like the last before the cold took it. Batu rode among them without banners. He wore no cloak of fur, only a coarse wool coat and a leather cap pulled low. He did not claim the title of leader. He did not need to. Men found him in the dark by the way he set his jaw and kept his hands still. They knew him by the silence that meant resolve, not fear. If you had been starving with them, would you follow a name or a steadiness? On the 12th night of the long breath, they camped along a dry riverbed beneath a cliff that broke the wind. Fires were small, spaced far. A rider arrived from the east. One of the scouts who had once carried orders, now carrying news. He dismounted slowly, and when he removed his glove, 2 fingers were missing from frost. There are villages still standing, he said. Stone houses, a mill that turns all winter. They closed their gates when they saw our smoke. Do they have grain? A voice asked. They do, and spears. Men looked to Batu. He did not speak. He walked to the cliff and watched the stars change position in the river of night. He remembered the Khan's voice. The strong always eat. He remembered the laugh that cut the tent like a blade. He remembered the village that burned. He said, finally, we do not burn mills. They reached the stone village in 2 days. It sat on a shelf of land above a frozen stream, with walls stacked in patient layers that spoke of seasons, not raids. The gate opened only wide enough for a man to stand between the halves. We are not your enemies, Batu said. We are hungry. What are you? The gatekeeper asked. Without the man you followed. Cold, Batu said, and done with fire. The gate did not open wider, but a sack of meal slid through the space and knocked dust from the ground. Then another sack. The men did not cheer. They bowed their heads as if at a burial. Someone whispered, "This is mercy." No one corrected him. Batu said, "This is a start." They built new fires and did not hide them. Smoke rose into the brittle air like lines drawn on glass. The stew was thin, but it was honest. Men cupped it in both hands and watched steam move over their fingers like a promise. They did not speak of the Khan's camp or the cup or the laugh. They talked of harness mending and horse hooves, of how to keep saddles warm so leather would not crack in the night. In the morning, they returned the sacks and left a coil of rope and a hand-forged hook in exchange. The gate stayed mostly shut, but a hand rose from behind it and held steady above the wall. It was enough. News traveled backward faster than the riders. The Khan had not chased them. He stayed in the old camp for 3 days, then 2 more, then none. He broke down the great tent with his own hands. The story said, and wrapped the white cup in cloth. He rode with a small guard west, where the ground rises into blue hills and the wind smells of pine. Some said he sought a lake to stare into until it returned a face he recognized. Some said he went to the ruined villages and counted doors. Some said he looked for a voice he had never learned to hear. Batu rode on with the men. He did not hunt prisoners. He hunted distance. He learned which river ice was safe to cross by sound, which trees will burn when they look too green to burn, which kind of snow will cut the skin if you fall. He learned that men can be bound by silence that is chosen, not imposed. He learned to set a cup down without waiting for a command. When a man asked, "What do we do when spring comes?" Batu said, "We plant." The man laughed because none of them had hands shaped for that. Then he stopped laughing when he saw Batu wasn't smiling. When spring finally came, it was a thin one. Grass grew like questions. Horses bent their knees like old men when they lay down. But the river moved again. Fish swam in it and did not care about banners. The stone village opened its gate and let the men trade iron for seed. A boy pointed to Batu's coat and asked if all leaders dressed like that. "Leaders," Batu said, "dress like the weather." The boy considered this and decided it was true. Word came from west of the Blue Hills. The Khan had taken up in a hunting lodge that had belonged to a man he once called friend. He kept no court. He sent no orders. He spoke to no one when he rode except his horse. He walked the lodge's rooms at night and stopped in doorways as if he had been about to call someone, as if he had forgotten the name. There were only 2 objects he kept near the white cup, and a strip of cloth stained with ash. Batu listened and said nothing. He turned the camp east toward a valley where the soil was dark and a stream ran thick enough to turn a small wheel. They built 3 frames and set stones to mark fields. They learned which seeds like to sit near the sun and which prefer the bend of shade at the base of the hill. They learned the talk of wind through new grain. Some nights, men woke with their hands half closed, ready to hold reins that were not there. Some mornings, Batu woke with the sound of a cup hitting dirt in his ears. He said nothing to chase it away. He carried it like a compass. When, at last, riders came from the west with the Khan's banner folded under an arm. The men did not reach for weapons. They did not kneel. The riders did not shout. They looked tired and careful. They handed Batu the folded banner. It felt heavier than cloth. "He asked us to bring this," the lead rider said. "He said he didn't need it anymore." "Where is he?" Batu asked. "In the lodge by the lake." "Is he alone?" The rider swallowed. "He has a horse," he said, "and a cup." Batu folded the banner again and laid it on a flat stone. He did not raise it. He did not burn it. He let the weight sit where the sun could warm it. "You can eat here," he told the riders. "Then you can decide whether you are going west or east." The men ate without looking over their shoulders. Some stayed, some left. None asked for orders. Summer grew in clean layers. The fields held. The men learned to sleep like stones, heavy, unafraid. When storms came, they put the tools under a roof and their bodies under the sky. When storms passed, they counted each other aloud, as if to prove that voices still knew the names they carried. Batu walked the rows and learned the small bruises of leaves. He learned to be pleased by a line of ants that found a dropped crumb and organized themselves until the work was done. He learned to be careful with fire. He did not teach men to fear it. He taught them to keep it in the circle where food simmers and faces are lit from below in a gentler way. When autumn started to carve the light into sharper pieces, Batu saddled his horse and rode west alone. He did not carry a banner. He carried only a water skin and a knife that had belonged to no one important. He rode until the ground began to lift. He rode until the trees learned to leave their leaves where the wind could not find them yet. He rode to the lodge by the lake and found a horse tied to a post and a cup on a steppe white in the morning glare. The door was open. The Khan sat just inside it, with his hands on his knees and his back against the wall. He looked like a man who had been told to wait by someone who had not returned. He turned his head slowly when Batu stopped in the doorway. He looked at Batu's coat, then his hands, then his face. He did not stand. He did not reach for the whip that was not there. He did not say mercy, like a prayer he had been proud of. He said, "Is it spring already?" "It was," Batu said. "Now it is not." The Khan looked past him at the lake. A wind moved along its skin, and the surface shivered the way a horse shivers flies from its back. "I used to think the lake moved for me," the Khan said, as if wind obeyed when I raised my hand. "It never did," Batu said. "I know." The Khan's mouth made the shape of a smile, but did not finish it. "I know now." They said very little after that. Batu cooked a flat cake on a stone and broke it in half. They ate without speaking. The lake did not come closer. The forest did not lean in. Time did not hurry to see what would be said next. When they were finished, Batu set his half-stone by the door and stood. He looked at the CUP on the step and did not pick it up. "What do you call this?" the Khan asked. "When a son does not kneel and a father does not command." Batu thought for a long moment. "I think we call it winter," he said, "and we keep each other warm without burning." He left the lodge. He did not look back. The path east was not the same as the path west, though the ground was made of the same dirt. When he reached the fields, men were laughing softly at something that was not cruel. A wheel turned, a rope creaked. A boy ran by and almost fell, then did not. Batu watched the boy's arms windmill and settle, and he felt himself choose a kind of silence that would not break men's ribs from the inside. That winter, when the frost wrote white lines on the edges of every tool, Batu set the cups out in a row and told the men to lift them only when thirsty. They laughed because of course they knew how to drink. Then they lifted the cups when thirsty. The lesson passed from hand to hand without speeches. Some nights, the wind tore the roofs, and men had to hold the corners down with their bodies. Some days, the wheel froze, and they had to break the ice with the butt of a spear. They did the work without songs because the work wanted their breath. In the stillest hours, when the fire burned small to stretch its life, Batu would walk to the ridge that looked east. He would hold the old banner in his hands and let it hang between them like a curtain. Then he would fold it again and carry it back to the stone. He never cut it. He never raised it. He let cloth learn patience. The story spread without messengers. There was a place where men had learned to live without the fear that had once fed them. The place did not have a name. When strangers came, they were given work before they were given questions. Some stayed. Some left and carried the idea away like an ember in a clay jar. If you have watched this far, ask yourself, what keeps an empire standing? The man on the chair or the hands that lift the chair? If a cup holds fear, who pours, who drinks, and who, quietly, sets the cup down and opens both hands for something else? History will say he built an empire and lost it. The men who laughed will say the empire was never a thing of earth, only a weather inside their chests. They will say the weather changed. They will say a day came when they chose a stillness that was not obedience, and the steppe endless indifferent will say nothing at all and be right.